Hi, I'm Bruce Reyes-Chow, and I'm one of the delegation leaders for Friends of Sabeel North America and Sabeel. These delegations are meant to give you more depth and texture to your activism and solidarity with the Palestinian people. And today I'm sitting with Joseph, who is on a delegation right now, just to chat a little bit about what you might experience should you choose to be part of one of these delegations. So, Joseph, would you just introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Joseph Peterson. I live in Spokane, Washington. I was a pastor for about 15 years in local church ministry. And then due to COVID and a lot of other things, I kind of pivoted careers and started doing more video. So that's what I do kind of full time as my vocation for work, is doing video documentaries and working with clients all across the world on telling their story through video.
Great. Before we get into specifics about kind of what we do or even some of your background, if you just had like one or two things just right now in the midst of this delegation that strike you that you've experienced so far, what would those be?
That's a great question. I think the first thing that would come to mind is beauty. I think a lot of what we see in the West, and specifically in like Western media, is Gaza, right? The bombings, the death, the destruction, which is heartbreaking, and it's violent, and it's genocide, and it's all of those things. And one of the things that I'm noticing being on this trip is that is part of the Palestinian experience, but there's this whole other side to the Palestinian experience that's laughter and beauty and joy and cafes and circus and bookstores and so many things that make up their experience as people living under occupation. And I think that was unexpected for me in visiting all of these people and talking with them and their hospitality and their joy amidst such a violent living experience was shocking to me.
Yeah, I think sometimes folks are expecting and almost feeling guilty about getting here and it not being this kind of rubble and wasteland everywhere.
Yes.
And we're very clear, like, we're not chasing war zones, we're not doing activism, which some groups really do, an accompaniment. And so, I think there's this disorientation that kind of happens, even for those of us that have been engaged in this or even think we know about what's going on.
Yes.
Which I think is a good way. So what did you bring here? Had you been here before? What was your level of knowledge? Do you feel like somebody has to know a lot of things, can know nothing? Like what's that for you?
Yeah, great question. I had been to Jerusalem before, but my last trip, this was about 8 or 9 years ago, was with a very conservative group. So I had some connections who wanted to sponsor me to go on a trip because I was a pastor and I had never been to the Holy Land before. And my experience with that, looking back, was so much different than what I'm experiencing now. Looking back, that was very conservative. There were a lot of ties to Christian Zionism. It was very like, kind of the language we've been using this week is like Disneyland trip of like, the sites that they take Americans to go to.
Right.
And so that was my first experience in the region. And then over the years, just as I was a pastor and learning and growing in my theology and my politics and my ethics, learning more about Palestine and the Palestinian experience under Israeli occupation, I became more involved, I guess, in the struggle for Palestinian liberation, both stateside and then getting connected to people like you and Sabeel and Fazna and the family there of people who were actively trying to both educate people in the West and all over the world, really, and then also give them an opportunity to experience community with Palestinian people here in Palestine.
Right. This is very different. You mentioned when you came before, that was more like a tour group, and it was kind of it was very much we talk about Disneyfying Palestine. This is not the same thing, right? This is not the same thing. There's some intentionality to who we visit and when we visit that is often like a little startling sometimes. But as we've gone through this, what are the things you're taking away? Not that just you'll tell when you get back, right? I think there's this theme about come and see, go and tell, but how does it change your solidarity, your activism? How does it impact you as you go back to the U.S. and try to make a difference in what's going on?
Yeah, great question. Yesterday when we were talking with one of the activists, he said something along the lines of Palestine being the key to liberation in the world. And I think for me, in my context, I'm in a very progressive state in Washington State. And currently, right now, under the Trump administration, we are kind of, in our context, sort of guarded a little bit from a lot of the things that are happening in the more conservative areas of the United States. And so it's easy to be like, oh yeah, this administration, all these things are happening. It's really horrible for like trans people and for immigrants and like, you know, women and all of these things. And hearing him talk about what it looks like to live under like a fascist regime of a violent military state, and seeing how what is happening in Palestine is kind of the logical outworking and conclusion of everything happening in the States right now.
Right.
Like it might be 50 years down the road, but that's what it's like, with checkpoints and limited rights and people having their rights taken from them and people not having access to the resources that they need. And so before coming on this trip, I really saw the struggle for Palestinian liberation as an issue. Mm-hmm. You know, it was kind of one of so many different things that are happening in the world. And then to go back with such a different lens of this being the central work of what it looks like for a military state that has right-wing ties and very conservative ideas to occupy land and then enforce that on people, most of whom don't agree with what they want to do or what their vision for utopia is. And so I think that is what I'm bringing back, is a real sense of not just education, but also experiencing something that is the outworkings of everything that's happening in the context that I live in.
Right. There are probably some key questions for people who are thinking about coming. There's very baseline if you're contemplating being part of one of these delegations. I think one of them is, are we going to be in danger? Right? I mean, I think there's this sense from what we see in the West. And then there is a question of how much do I need to know? Like, do I need to be an expert coming in? Like, what kind of blank slate am I going to be? And then I think there is just this, what are the logistics like? I mean, I think there's this, Americans, as patient as we want to be, sometimes things don't, like, it's not a tour group, right? It's different, like you're not signing up for Princess Cruises or those kind of things. So let's take the first one. So have you felt in danger? Like, what's been the vibe around danger and safety and all that?
Yeah, I mean, there's always risk in a trip like this. You are very protected as being a U.S. citizen. Mm-hmm. From my context, like, I knew that going in, that I was going to have a certain level of privilege in the border and checkpoints and all of those kind of things. So there is a level of risk, but I think feeling that sense of fear that you would feel, I think is actually part of the trip, because that's what people living under occupation feel constantly. Right. Like, am I gonna get checked? Are they gonna stop me? Are they gonna like take my stuff? Like, that fear, I think, is actually part of the experience, because you get a sense of what it's like. It's nowhere near compared to what they're experiencing, obviously, because we have so much privilege and we can come and then leave.
Right, and then we're leaving,
But I think that danger or that risk, you know, now more than ever, like I said, it's nothing compared to a Disneyland trip, you know, here in the Holy Land or something like that, because we're going through checkpoints and we're mostly talking with Palestinian people. Some of it we can't even talk about, really. But for the most part, I think if that's someone's biggest concern, I don't think this is the trip for them. But I think if that's something that you're willing to lean into and allow to like form you as a person, I think that's going to be a really helpful part of the trip.
Right. And when we talk about fear, it's not stemming from we're going into places where there's active violence going on and all those.
It's not rubble and you know.
But there are moments when we're going through somewhere and there is a tone shift.
Yes.
Like there's like, oh, this is now different.
Yes.
And this
The military gets on the bus. They have a gun. Like they're checking passports.
And
like
it's very serious
Yes,
all of a sudden.
absolutely.
And that whole thing, it's jarring for us, but this is life.
Yes.
And
And even our Sabeel leaders have been like, hey, make sure you have your passports. Like we might get stopped. It might be 3 hours.
Yeah.
It might be 2 minutes. Like you just never know. That is something they're so used to. And I think that's really healthy for us to experience on these trips is a sense of what, again, occupation actually looks like.
In terms of what people, I think some people like only like hardcore activists go, or you need to be really knowledgeable about everything. What's your sense of what's the level of knowledge you need to have to be on a Sabeel delegation?
Yeah, great question. I'll just speak for myself. I was very interested in Palestinian liberation, but I really had very little context for what that meant beyond Israel being a military state that was enforcing, genocide on Palestinians. Like I was definitely pro-Palestine.
Right.
But on the other side of it, I had no real context for like what the West Bank is, what these different zones that people are living in. Like geographically, politically, a lot of that I didn't have much knowledge of. And I think there's an automatic level of interests or activism or buy-in that somebody would have to be connected to Sabeel or Fosna.
Right.
But I think beyond that level, you can come in with no real concept for what all of this means, or even necessarily be tied to faith or church or anything like that. I think, we have somebody on our delegation who would not identify as somebody who has a lot of experience of faith. And then we have 3 pastors. So it's, and so it's very open. I think it's a very generous trip of there's not an expectation that if you're like a novice or you don't have a lot of understanding, I think this is a trip where you can gain that and where you can grow in that, which for me has been like really, really amazing.
Well, and I think you touched on 2 things. I think one is Sabeel is a Christian Palestinian liberation organization. And I think there would be, like some folks are like, well, why is religion so important in all this? I mean, as we discover in this, is it infiltrates everything, whether it's a particularly religious organization anyway. Like that's the landscape. And about the activism piece, I think there's something about even folks who are strong activists come here and have disorientation. And I think that there is this, or wanting to prove our status back in the States to folks here.
Yes.
And there's like a sharp reawakening of like, great that you're doing all of this.
Yes.
But you're still part of the suffering here.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's not done in a condemning manner mostly, but it's, it's just reality check for some of us who feel like we might be at a certain level of expertise or activism.
Which is really helpful because you can share all you want on social media, or you can go to a protest in the States. Like, we need to be doing those things. And then there's another level where you talk with someone who's like, you get to go back and live your normal life 99% of the time. And I have to stay here and I have to experience a violent military state occupying my land. And like we said in the beginning, that disorientation or that uncomfortability to have somebody be like addressing that and kind of confronting you as a privileged person in the West is I think it's necessary. So.
Well, let's just end with really exciting stuff like logistics and all that kind of thing. Again, there's always some flexibility, but how would you advise people what lens do they need to have as they're approaching this? Yes, I want to go. I fill out a registration form. Now there's just all of these things, moving pieces that go on. Like, what would you say to somebody who is thinking about it, and what kind of lens do they have as they're being part of this preparation and trip?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think there's just a level of flexibility that you need to understand. Like, you're not gonna have all the information.
Right.
Like, I didn't have my itinerary till after the first
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Like, we crossed the border, we got to the hotel, and after lunch, the first day is when we were like, okay, here's what we're doing for the week.
Yeah.
So I think for people who are like, I want to know the plan, I want to know where we're going to go, I want to know who we're going to talk to, like, that is not the vibe of this trip.
Yeah.
You get that once you get here and everything's settled and,
Right.
But I think a level of openness and a level of flexibility to what the logistics are going to be, when you're going to go, what time you're going to be back, if you're going to have a bathroom break, like if you're going to have access to water, like all of those things are just like, you have to realize that this trip is in service of Palestinian people, and it's not catered to an experience where you are comfortable all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think for me, that was a really helpful lens to have. Is I had a couple email communications with like flight information, and like bios and like who I am. But beyond that, it was like, get on the plane. Hopefully the border goes well. I was totally on my own in Jordan,
Right.
I just walked through and did that. And so there is like obviously communication and there's help when you need it. But I think a lot of it is just like, again, that sort of contextual experience to be like, this is what people go through all the time. Like somebody we were talking to yesterday said, I can't make a plan for 2 minutes because something could change.
Yeah.
And I think, again, to kind of incarnate that struggle from a very small percent of what a Palestinian person would experience here, I think, again, is part of the experience and has been so transformative and so helpful for me to inform going back and how that's going to form the work that I do moving forward back in Spokane.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, I trust our Palestinian leaders.
Yes,
I trust
100%.
Sabeel. And it is that weird thing. It's like after we did, we had a very intense day yesterday. All of them are intense, and it was just, if you just looked at the itinerary and saw what we were doing, it would feel like, these are weird to put together on the same day. And then afterwards, maybe our hosts, our leaders, the group that lives here knows what we need to see and experience. And yesterday, I think, was a great example of very intense kinds of things, and then these other things surrounding it that on paper wouldn't feel like
moments
they were.
Of joy.
Yeah,
and you're talking with somebody who was in jail for 13 times
and then
abused,
we're swinging off a trapeze.
And then we're going to a circus.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it is. And I think, again, just coming back to that flexibility of like, it's going to be disorienting.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to have time to process what is happening. And again, I think that's part of the experience, is putting you into a situation where you are 100% reliant on the Palestinian experience and our leaders.
Yeah.
And for me, that has been really helpful to just have a lens of, I trust these people literally with my life.
Yeah.
Like at any point, something could go wrong.
Yeah.
And I know that the people that are leading my trip, like they are going to ensure that what I experience here is what I need going back.
When it's always hard in the early stages, I'm like, well, I just trust to be able to create their itinerary.
Like, what are we going to do? I don't actually know.
And you don't.
And that's okay.
And then afterwards, you're like, oh, yeah, I get it. But
totally.
I mean, there's this, like, you have to just say it and then have people experience it and then be like, oh, this makes sense now.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So if you're interested in being on one of these delegations, I would encourage you to contact Fosna or Sabeel and find out. There are various delegations that go on throughout the year, and it would be great to see you on one of those so you can come and see and then go and tell.